everyone, it's Jill from the Cozy Company, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this adorable chunky knit pumpkin. This is a beginner-friendly project and the perfect handmade addition to your fall decor. It's quick, simple, and a great project if you're newer to finger knitting. For today's project, you will need 1 skein of size 7 jumbo chenille yarn. I'm going to be using Hobby Lobby Eternal Bliss in the color Butterscotch. You'll need 1 strand of yarn in a different color, roughly 12 inches long. We'll be using this later in the tutorial. A pair of scissors, polyfill for your pumpkin, and an optional stitch marker to help you keep track of your rows. I'm just using this cute little butterfly clip, but feel free to use anything that you'd like. Once you have all your materials ready, we can get started making our chunky knit pumpkin. So to start, I'm going to find the end of my yarn. And I want to leave about a 12-inch tail. So I'm going to roughly measure about 12 inches and I'm going to grab it at the 12-inch mark. And the very first step to our pumpkin is we want to create a slip knot. So at that 12-inch mark, I'm just going to make a loop similar to the breast care awareness symbol, like this. And I want the tail of the yarn on top. Once we have that, I'm going to take the working yarn. The working yarn is the yarn that's attached to your ball of yarn. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to put it up and through that loop like this. I'm going to grab that yarn with one hand like this and pull down on the tail at the same time to tighten that slip knot. Now I want my loop size roughly 2 fingers width wide. So all I'm going to do to make this loop smaller, instead of completely redoing it, is I'm just going to pull on the working yarn and the tail at the same time to make it smaller. So I'm going to do about 2 fingers wide. Now the goal for your chunky knit pumpkin is to keep the loops as small as possible because we don't want any polyfill to come out. So I'm going to try and keep my first row of loops about 2 fingers wide. And then when we get further into the project, you're going to see my loops get a little bit smaller, about 1 to 1.5 finger width wide. Once we have our slip knot, we're going to go ahead and chain on our foundation chain. So to do that, I'm going to take my thumb and my pointer. It doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed, it's the same technique. But I'm going to take my thumb and my pointer and I'm going to put it through this loop. So I'm going to go from the top of the table down towards the table and put my 2 fingers through that loop. So it's like this. With those 2 fingers, I'm going to grab and pinch the working yarn. Again, the working yarn is the yarn that's attached to your ball of yarn. So I'm going to grab and pinch that working yarn, and I'm going to pull up another loop the same exact size, about 2 fingers width wide, like that. So we've now just chained on 2. I'm going to do that same thing through my new loop. So I'm going to take my thumb and my pointer and I'm going to put it through that loop. So top of the table down towards the table. I'm going to put it through that loop. I'm going to grab and pinch that working yarn and pull up another loop the same size, about 2 fingers wide. We've just chained on 3. We want to repeat that process until you get to your desired pumpkin size. But for today's project, I'm going to go ahead and chain on a total of 15. So we've already done 3 together. I'm going to do 12 more. So I'm just repeating that same process 12 more times. So I've just completed my chain of 15, as you can see here. I left it laying flat on the table while I was pulling up those loops, so it remained nice and flat. And I tried to stay as consistent as possible with my loop size, about 2 fingers width wide. So this is what we're looking like right now. The best part about this chunky knit pumpkin is you can make it as large or as small as you want. So if you'd like a cute little teeny tiny pumpkin, you can just do a chain of 6, let's say. If you want an even bigger pumpkin, you can chain on as many as you'd like. So once you get the technique down, you can play around with what size pumpkin works best for you and what you're trying to achieve. The next step is going to be making this foundation chain into a circle. So in order to do that, I'm going to fold this foundation chain in half. So I'm going to pick it up at its center point, and I'm going to pick it up and fold it in half so the tail is on the bottom half. So the tail where we first started is on the bottom, and the loop that I have sticking up is right on top of it, like this. So it's folded in half with the tail on the bottom, and that loop that we have sticking up is on top. What I want to do is I want to find the chain space right underneath that loop that's sticking out. So there's that loop, but right underneath it is the foundation chain, and I want to find the space right where my finger is poking through. I want to find that space right there, and I'm going to insert this tail through that small space. So this is the 12-inch tail when we first started. I'm going to insert that from the back of that small space towards the front and pull all the way until those two ends are together. And now we have a circle. I'm going to go ahead and fold that back up. I just think it's easier to work with to have it folded in half. But feel free to have it in a circle if that works best for you. And then I'm just going to take my little stitch marker and I'm going to put it on top of that loop right there. The very next step is we are going to pull up loops on our foundation chain. So what I mean by that is on our foundation chain, you can see that there's bumps or twists of our foundation chain all the way around, just on the top portion of our foundation chain. So this is the loop that I have sticking up right here. I'm going to go to the very right of it and find the next bump, so where my finger's poking through. So it's not the center part, it's not the bottom. You can see right here that it's just that top little bump. It kind of looks like half of a rainbow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumb and my pointer again, and I'm going to put it through that twist or bump. So you can see here. So I'm taking my project from the top and I'm putting my fingers towards the inside of the project. And with those two fingers, I'm going to grab and pinch my working yarn. Again, the working yarn is the yarn that's attached to your ball of yarn. And I'm going to pull up another loop, but this time I want to do about 1.5 finger width wide. So now it looks like I have two cute little bunny ears. Once I have two loops, I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm going to go to the very next bump or twist in that foundation chain, so to the right of it. That just, when I say to the right of it, you could be working towards the left. That's totally fine. This is just the way that my project is facing. So don't get too caught up on if you're working on the other side. That's completely fine. The technique is the same. But I'm going to go to the very next bump or twist, and I'm going to take my thumb and my pointer again. I'm going to put them through that bump or twist. I'm going to grab and pinch that working yarn to pull up another loop the same size, about 1.5 finger width wide. So now I have 3 loops. I'm going to continue pulling up those loops all the way around that foundation chain until I get back to this tail. So as you can see here, I made it back to the tail, and at the end of this row, I should have a total of 14 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now your number may be different depending on how many you casted onto your foundation chain. So let's say you did 7 on your foundation chain, including your slip knot, you would have 6 loops sticking up. So because we did a chain of 15, we should have 14 loops on now pulled up on our pumpkin. For the next step, we're gonna actually be doing the same thing over and over again until we're ready to close off our pumpkin. So instead of pulling up loops through the twists like we had just did, or the bumps, we're now gonna be doing that same thing, but through each and every one of these loops. So we're gonna start in the loop that has our stitch marker on it, and very similar to what we did with the bumps or the twists of the previous row, we're gonna do here. So I'm gonna take my thumb and my pointer again, and I'm gonna put it through this loop. Again, going from the top of the table down towards the table itself. I'm putting my 2 fingers through, and I'm going to grab and pinch that working yarn as close as possible to where it's coming out of that loop, that previous loop. I'm gonna grab and pinch that working yarn, and I'm gonna pull up a loop the same size, about 1 finger width wide. Once I do that, I'm gonna take my little stitch marker and I'm just gonna put it on that new loop. This is gonna indicate the very first loop in our new row. Once I've knit that, I'm gonna go to my very next loop. Mine happens to be on the right, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take my thumb and my pointer, I'm gonna put it through that loop, I'm gonna grab and pinch that working yarn to pull up another loop about 1 finger width wide. I'm gonna do that all the way around for the remaining loops of my row until I get back to this loop with the stitch marker. And just to remind you, we wanna try and keep our loop sizes the same size, about 1 finger width wide, and we wanna try to keep the distance between the loops as small as possible. So what I mean by that is when you're going from, let's say we just did this loop and we're about to do this loop, instead of putting your fingers through and grabbing your working yarn this far away, creating a gap between the loops, we want to try and pull up our new loop as close as possible to that previous loop so there's no gaps in between. That's going to make sure that our polyfill does not come out. So we're just going to continue pulling up these loops until we get to back to the stitch marker. So I've just made it back to my stitch marker, and that means that we have completed this row of loops. So together we've done 3 rows. We've done our foundation chain, we've pulled up a row of loops, and then we've knitted through those loops. I'm gonna go ahead and do 9 more rows, doing the same exact thing that we just did through each of these loops by knitting them, and then I will meet you back here. So feel free to pause here until you get to your desired height. Again, if you're doing a smaller pumpkin or a larger pumpkin, you'll need to adjust your row count just so it isn't too tall or too short, but feel free to play around with it to get to your desired height. Hi everyone, welcome back. So I've just knit 9 more rows, and this is what my pumpkin is looking like right now. So the very next step that we're going to do is we're actually going to close off the bottom of the pumpkin, which is where we had our 12-inch tail. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this 12-inch tail from where we first started, and I'm going to be working through these twists of our foundation chain. So I'm going to take this tail and I'm going to insert it through each and every one of these twists, going from the inside of the pumpkin towards the outside. So I'm going to take this tail and I'm going to find that first twist of the foundation chain, and I'm going to push it through the inside towards the outside and gently pull each time. So it kind of cinches on itself. I'm then going to find the next twist or bump of the foundation chain and do the same thing. So take the tail from the inside towards the outside and pull. I'm going to go around through each and every one of those twists from the inside towards the outside, and as you can see, as I'm going around, that hole is starting to close up. So once that hole is completely closed, I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot at the base of this tail as close to the pumpkin as I can. So I'm just going to take my 2 fingers, I'm going to wrap the tail around, and then push the tail through that hole I just created, like that. And I'm going to do a double knot. Once I have a double knot, I'm going to insert the knot and that tail through that small hole that I just closed up. So we're looking like this. Next step is I'm going to take my other colored yarn, Hobby Lobby Eternal Bliss in color taupe, and I'm just going to take this tail and I'm going to tie it to the very base of where we just pushed that tail through. So where we made that double knot, I'm just going to fold it inside out so you can see it. So this is the inside of my pumpkin. I'm going to tie it to where we just created those double knots. So I'm just going to tie my tan yarn right to that tail on the inside of my pumpkin. Now I just flipped my pumpkin inside out so you could see, but yours will look like this. So we're just tying that to the inside to that tail. Next, we're going to take our polyfill, we're going to fill the pumpkin around this tail. Once our pumpkin is stuffed with polyfill, we are going to take our working yarn, that's the yarn that's attached to your roll of yarn, and we are going to cut the working yarn, leaving about a 12 to 14 inch tail. Now what we're going to do with this tail is very similar to what we did on this side, except instead of going through the twists of the foundation chain, we're going to be going through each and every one of these loops right here. So the same technique, we're going to go from the inside towards the outside, but we're going to go through the loops instead. So I'm just taking the tail and I'm pushing them through each and every one of these loops, one at a time. So once I've gone all the way around each and every one of loops, I'm just gonna pull gently but firmly until all those holes close up. And our pumpkin stem should be in the center. What I'm gonna do with this is the same thing I did with the other side. I'm gonna tie a knot at the base of that pumpkin and a double knot. And I'm gonna stick the knot and whatever tail I have left in the inside of the pumpkin. And then you can play around with this tail. I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter by just tucking it into the pumpkin like that. And there you have your chunky knit pumpkin. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything like that, feel free to shoot me an email. I will put it in the video description below. And again, feel free to customize this any way that you'd like. You can make teeny tiny pumpkins. You can make much larger pumpkins. I would say this is a small to medium sized pumpkin. So feel free to make it as large or small as you want. Thank you so much for watching my video, and don't forget to subscribe.